Welcome back YouTube. My name is Dennis Panuta for tutorials.eu. In this video we will have a look at isTrigger. And you have seen physical bodies already, you have seen colliders, all those kind of things. Now let's add a new component which is a isTrigger, and it's actually not even a new component, and that's the beauty, because it is simply the collider itself. So you can make a collider isTrigger. For example, our player could be isTrigger, or a new object. So let's create a new object into our game, a 3D object. Let's go with a cube. And what I will do with the cube, I will change the position to reset. So I'm going to reset it, and I'm going to drag it a little bit up and to this side. Now let's change the scale of Y to, let's say, 5, and the scale of X to, let's go with 3. So now we will have a wall here. And maybe it's better if I move the wall to the side and change the X to 1 and the Z to, let's go with 4. So now I have this huge ball here. And what I want to happen is if I walk through, or if the ball passes into this cube, I want something to be triggered. So I want something to happen. For example, I want the whole thing to disappear. So let's say I want the wall to disappear, which is this cube. So let's give it a isTrigger. The cube itself gets an isTrigger. Let's have a look. What that does is it deactivates its collider in terms of it's not a wall anymore. So it's not a wall that we cannot pass through anymore. So now as you can see, our ball simply ignores it. It just walks through. So if we want this wall to do anything, whenever something passes it or hits it, then we need to create a new script. So I'm just gonna call this script trigger script. So let's go ahead and create a new script, right click, create, and then C# script, and call it trigger script. Now I'm going to assign that trigger script to my cube. So let's go ahead and add the component, scripts, and trigger script. And now let's open trigger script up. And there's only one thing that I need in here. So I won't need to start an update method. And again, it's not that important that you understand the coding itself, but it's more important that you understand the principles. So whenever something needs to happen, when our object is hit by another object, we need to use the onTriggerEnter method. There's a method called onTriggerEnter is called when the collider other enters the trigger. And other could be our player, for example. So let's do that. I just pressed enter. I chose the onTriggerEnter method, and now it's created for me automatically here. So what I can enter here is, for example, print triggered. So I'm just gonna print something onto the console, and you will see what that does in a second. So let's do that. So now our cube, it's really important that our cube has this trigger script. Now we run the code. And let's pass through our trigger. And as you can see on the console here, it says trigger. So now let's trigger once again. Let's try to get the ball back. There we are. And let's hit it again. And you can see it was called 3 times already, and that's because we've passed through it 3 times. What you could use that for is, for example, to get rid of this whole game object. So let's do that. Let's go back into the code, and we call trigger now, and we also call the destroy method, and I'm just gonna give gameObject. So what that will do, and I'm just gonna use gameObject as the parameter. What a parameter is, what the destroy method is, if you don't know those things yet, we will get into that later. So the destroy method, what it will do, it will simply destroy the game object that contains this trigger script. So that's what this line here says. So let's have a look how this looks in game. So I'm gonna simply trigger this event, and you see our wall has disappeared. So if we set up our game slightly differently, so I'm just gonna go ahead and position my ball at the bottom straight away and move it to the left.
Hey, don't forget to subscribe and like the video.
And now I'm going to move my cube a little bit, and I'm going to duplicate that cube multiple times. And now I move the cubes one after the other. So let's just move them. And this one as well, and the last one as well. So now if I start it off, what will happen is that one after the other will disappear. There we are. I simply duplicated them with using Control D or Command D based on which system you're using. So right click, duplicate is another option. So if you duplicate it this way, then the object will be duplicated at the same position. So that's why you cannot see that there are two objects. So you need to move one in order to see that there are two objects in fact. So let's go ahead and do that again. And now, as you can see, the destroy method is called. Now what we could do is deactivate that is trigger onto any of our objects, or all of them are objects, at least of our cube objects. So let's do that real quick, except for the last two. And now what I want to add as well is a rigid body to all of them, or except, well, the first ones at least. So let's add a physics rigid body to cube 1, 2, 3, and that's it. So physics rigid body and add physics. It's important that you use physics and not physics 2D, because otherwise it won't work. Now let's run it again. And now let's try to hit it with our ball. And as you can see, the first one still had a trigger. Now boom, boom. And those two, they just fall off. So the ones that had a trigger, they disappeared. And the ones that didn't have a trigger, so 4, 5, and I think that's it, they had a trigger still, so they disappeared. But the other ones didn't disappear because they didn't have the isTrigger method activated, and that's why they weren't destroyed. So now let's get rid of the isTrigger method from each of them. And what that will allow us to do is to have a little domino game. So let's go ahead and hit them off. Maybe we should make our player a bit bigger. I'm gonna pause the game again. Go ahead and change the radius, or actually the scale of our player to, let's say 3 times 3 times 3. And let's drag it up a little bit. Okay. And now what we could do is go to here. You can use global or local. So now we're at global, and now you can move your camera towards the front, move it up a little bit. So now you have a better angle at things. So let's start it again. And now let's move it. And as you can see, oh, not all of them are moving. Why is that one not moving? Maybe you can figure it out. As you can see now, I can move it just at the edge of it. Maybe you know why it's not moving. I hope you know it. It is because it doesn't have a rigid body. So cube 1, 2, and 3 have a rigid body, but they are not here in the order of their naming. So cube 1 is the first one, the cube is the right one, 2 is this one, and 3 is that one. So the fourth is the one to the right, and the fifth is this one. And those two, they don't have a physics body. That's why they cannot be influenced by physics. So let's change that. Let's give them a physics body as well. Physics and rigid body. Now let's go ahead and play that again. Or maybe let's even get rid of this central one. So let's delete this. That cube here, delete. And let's run it again. And now let's hit it. And as you can see, we have this little domino game here. And let's try to get on top of it. Yeah, perfect. Our ball can, with its force, it can move on top of it. It can move around those objects. And now you could go ahead and create your own little game. A little domino game or a little collection game where you can collect game objects and make them disappear with the destroy method. All right, so that's it for now regarding colliders, rigid body, and its trigger. We will use those extensively in our games. So no worries if you don't really get a grasp of it completely yet, but we will get there and you will see it within real games. So see you in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please leave a like. And if you have any questions or suggestions, then leave a comment. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. And by the way, if you really love the content and you would like to have more of it or pretty much all of it, then of course, check out the link in the description to my whole course. See you in the next video.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.